What's up, everybody? This is Komegatze here with another Source 2 Filmmaker related tutorial. In this one, I'm going to be showing you my porting workflow for taking a character from one game and putting it as a model into Half-Life Alyx. So all the tools you're going to need is, first of all, obviously Half-Life Alyx. You're going to need to have the Half-Life Alyx Workshop Tools DLC installed. You're going to want Blender, specifically 2.93. This is the best version for porting character models to Source 2 without any issues, or with the least amount of issues. And you're going to need in my case, I'm importing a model from Unreal Engine. So if you're porting from a different game, you may need a different model importer. But for Unreal Engine, I use Blender 3D Import PSK PSA. And you're going to need the Blender Source Tools, which is used for importing and exporting files that are compatible with Source and Source 2. I specifically use Moondead's modified version of the Blender Source Tools because I find it to be better for character porting, specifically in the vein of adding cloth physics or face flexes or things like that. So first thing you need to do after the workshop tools are ready to go, you click on Half-Life Alyx. There may be a prompt that asks you if you want to launch the tools every time or if you want to launch the game every time. Personally, I don't play Half-Life Alyx every day, but I do use Source 2 Filmmaker every day, so I have the tools launch every time. So we're going to create a new add-on. In my case, I'm porting Travis Touchdown from No More Heroes 3. So I'm going to name my add-on No More Heroes 3 Travis Touchdown. Make sure it's spelled right. Then we just launch tools. Once the tools have finished loading, go to your add-ons folder. Go into the add-on that you just created. In my case, No More Heroes 3 Travis Touchdown. Create a models folder. Spelled exactly like this. Then I'm going to create a main folder. If I'm putting these characters in separate workshop add-ons, if people were to download them, they could all go in the same folder, which would be very convenient for organization. So if you plan on porting a whole bunch of models from one game, this is how you're going to do it. I'm going to have it as Komega. No More Heroes 3. Have a underscore in there. So if you are going to port other characters from the same game, make sure that the main folder, and you don't necessarily have to do this. It would be convenient for not just you, but if you're putting this on the workshop, it would be very convenient for the person who is downloading your port. So in there, I'm going to create a subfolder, just to be even more specific, No More Heroes 3. And then another folder, No More Heroes 3, Travis Touchdown. Okay. So now what we want to do is have the right folders set up inside here. So we're going to put source and textures. Now the reason I don't put models and materials is because there's already a models and materials folder in your Half-Life Alyx add-on by default. And what you don't want to do is make it confusing, because in my older ports where there's been people trying to, manually drag my add-on into their add-on, they're like, what the heck happened? I put it in the models folder, and then the issue is that they accidentally put it in the wrong models folder. So source and textures is where I'd put my mesh files, and textures obviously is where I'd put my image files that would then be compiled into materials later. And if you have prefabs, for example, if you've done a port before and there's a specific set of things you need to do, but you can do it for more than one character without having to do too much manual changes, you'd create a prefab. So I have a prefab folder here, and if you want to import the character's animations, you would create an animation folder. I don't think there's a specific name for it, but I just create an anims folder, which works well enough for me. So now that you have that ready, let's start on the Blender side of things. So if your character is already ready to go, all you need to do is have it ready for export, which is to go to Source Engine Export, set the DMX version of Binary 9, Model 22. Your engine path should be wherever your Half-Life Alyx folder is stored, Half-Life Alyx game bin Win64. And the export location, I have an export folder for this, but whatever is most convenient for you, put it there. In my case, since I'm porting from Unreal Engine, I'm going to go over here to PSK PSA and click on Import PSK. Go to where your mesh files are. I have a lot of mesh files here, and whatever character you're porting, it may be only a couple meshes, it may be only one mesh, and if it is one mesh, that's great. That's a lot more convenient for you. If you understand how Bodygroups work, for example, if you've already ported to source 1, you can kind of skip this step entirely. You can skip over this part. I'll probably timestamp it, so skip it, skip. But in this case, I have a lot of Bodygroups that I need to make, so I'm going to go through and import all of these meshes that I need, and then I'm going to combine all their armatures together. Now that I have all of these imported, and thankfully they have identical armatures, I'm going to combine all their armatures. So if your armatures don't match up, this might be a more difficult because of reasons of maybe conflicting bones, or a bone that was here was moved there, or something like that. But thankfully in my case, that's not an issue. So let's start by doing this one at a time. So I'm going to combine all of these armatures. However, this last one, which is the head, I'm going to save for later, and you'll see why in a bit. But let's start with these one at a time. We're going to select this armature and armature 0.001. And then we're going to press Control J to combine those. Now those are combined, and these two meshes are now under this same armature. Now, what you need to do when you combine an armature, you need to make sure that both meshes are using the same armature. So this mesh here is one of the meshes that has been joined. However, if you go here to the modifiers, you can see that it is connected to the armature. If you look here, when it combined the armatures, it created a duplicate of every single bone. Thankfully, all we need to do is make sure that all of the bones that you can tell are duplicated because they have the 0.001 afterwards. Make sure all these bones are deleted. So now the only bones in this armature that should be left are the ones that do not have the 0.001 thing on them. So if we look up 0.001, sure, it'll show all these meshes and stuff like that, which is fine for now. We'll come back to that later, but no bones. Okay. So if we go into pose mode and we pose, one of these bones, you'll see that one of the arms move, but this one doesn't. And that's because the new mesh doesn't recognize that it's supposed to be part of the same armature. So we're going to go here into modifiers. If we look here, this mesh, which is the mesh that did move with the bones, has armature 0.001 and the object tab here. However, if we go to this one, the object has nothing in here. So we'll just select it, click on the armature that you just merged into, which is armature 0.001 for now. And then if we go to pose mode, we can see that this bone actually moves both meshes, including all the other bones that move stuff like they are supposed to. And now you can basically do this to all the other meshes and armatures. So now we're going to select all of these, click on this main armature here, Control J. Now all the armatures have been merged into armature 0.001. You can see there's a ton of 0.001, 02, 03, 4, 5. You get it. You get the point. There's a lot of them. So we're just going to go into edit mode. And we're going to go through and just select these, delete the bones, which is a little tedious, but it's not difficult. It'll just take a bit of time. Just don't accidentally delete the original armature. It seems that I have finished deleting all of the duplicate bones. So now we'll go to the modifiers of each of these new meshes and make sure that they are all connected to the base armature that we merged them into. So now if we select the skeleton and go into pose mode, you can see that this skeleton moves the whole mesh. All of it. All of these meshes it has moved. The reason why I didn't want to merge this head mesh is, well, it causes no issue in this case. However, I do want to keep it separate for the case of face flexes, which would overcomplicate things if it was part of the main mesh. So right now, I'm not going to have that in the same thing. But before we move on to anything involving the head, we're going to move this into source 2 to make sure everything is working properly. So what we're going to start by doing is checking if there are any periods in the names, because source 2 seems to bug out when there's anything like periods or capital letters or spaces. If we look here, when we search for periods, there is quite a bit of them. So the easiest way to get rid of these is to go to Edit, Batch Rename, select All, Find, put in a period, Replace. We're going to replace it with an underscore, and it seems like none of the objects, which are these little mesh things here, have any periods, but just in case, we're going to check. It's okay. It says renamed 1 of 11 objects. So one object had a period in it. So good that we removed that. Go to materials. It says rename 36 materials, and it renamed 0. So no materials had periods in it. And you keep doing this for the other things like meshes. In this case, 13 out of 27 were renamed, and that just erased a whole bunch here. And if we go to armatures, well, that made the armature go underscore 001. We're gonna just put that back to armature. Now these modifiers, this being like a period, is fine. Source 2 doesn't really care about that as far as I know. So now this is ready for exporting. So we're going to go here with the settings that we set earlier. First, let's move this armature and meshes into a collection. We're going to name this collection Travis Body. I'm going to select all. We're going to export as travisbody.dmx. Going to go where we exported it, here in my export folder, Travis Body. Going to copy that. Going to go in our Half-Life Alyx folder. Go to where you have your add-on, wherever you set your folders. I'm going to put this in source. Now we're going to open Half-Life Alyx here. We're going to open Model Dock, this little gear icon with MD on it, or Model Dock Editor, whichever you want to call it. So now that we are in Model Dock, we're going to save our Model Dock file as, make sure we're saving it as in the correct folder. And you can save this VMDL in source or something like that, but I like to leave it right out of the source folder. I'm gonna name it No More Heroes 3 Travis Touchdown. Save. Click on Needs Compiling. Now we have our VMDL, but there's nothing in there. Why? Because we haven't imported our mesh yet. You can go to the star here, and there's Add Meshes, or if you want to make it harder for yourself for some reason, you can go to Add, and then Add Mesh, Add Meshes, and it's the same thing right there. But we're going to do it how I normally do it. Add Meshes, Source, Travis_body. Click on Needs Compiling. And we have our mesh in source 2. As you can see, it is very red. That is because it has no materials. So we're going to create a default material group. Since we haven't compiled any materials for him in source 2, we're going to check globally replace all materials in model. And I'm going to set this to reflectivity 90 just to get rid of that. And so you can see the model with shading default shading and shadows. See it casting shadows. Very nice. And you can set your preview to whatever, which is not really important until you add proper PBR textures that look really nice. So go here. If we, show the bone lines on this skeleton, looks all right, except when we look here. You can see here that there seems to be a separation of the bones. All these bones should really be connected. So what we're going to do is we're going to go here where it says skeleton view on this button. Click it. It could expand these all normally, or you can go here to the right side, expand all, which make your life a lot easier, and select all of these bones, control click, right click, and then select add bone markup. And then check do not discard. Sometimes when meshes are being imported into source 2, they'll for some reason discard them because source 2 thinks, oh, this bone is useless, we don't need it, except sometimes you do. So if you do need to discard any bones in source 2, you would want to do that manually, probably. But now you can see the bones are connected because it didn't discard any this time. And look at that, it brought in the face bones here, which we won't really need right now anyways, but it's good to know that it kept all the bones it should. So now the test to see if everything works, we go open a source filmmaker session file. I'm going to create this Travis port test. Create. Type in Travis. Default is root transform. I'm going to open console and SFM Viz mode 1 so we can see them a bit better. You can just turn off the lighting here and enable lighting, but when a character has no textures, it's kind of hard to see what's going on. So we have it like this. And we have this lower arm, and you can see that the bones move as they should. However, now there seems to be a problem. Wait a minute, why doesn't this look like all the other Half-Life Alyx models where there's like lines between the skeleton? There's a couple here, but no connections between the hand and the lower arm and the clavicle and the upper arm, and not on the legs. Well, that's because you don't have the right naming schemes. You can see some of them here in the right spot, like hand R, clavicle L, clavicle R. Those are in the right spots. When you check on the side here, however, where's the lower arm? Where's the upper arm? Well, they're not quite named this right thing. You can see their upper arm O2R when it probably, well, the one that you need, which is right here, I believe. It needs to be named arm lower R with underscore. And if you look at the pelvis here, you can see, usually most models, if we import G-Man here, who is very small in comparison to Travis right now, if we select his pelvis, and look how nice these bones are, if you select his pelvis and rotate him every which way, it'll rotate his whole body, which is probably how it should be. However, in this case, the pelvis only moves the lower body, which is kind of annoying to work with. So we're going to need to be reparenting and renaming some bones. Thankfully, the renaming part can be left completely up to Model Docs. You don't need to do that in Blender. However, the reparenting will have to be done in Blender, which shouldn't be too difficult depending on the complexity of your model. but it is something you'll need to do all the same. However, if you want your model to have all the character animations from the game and you don't want extra hours of work reparenting for every single, animated armature, I would recommend to not change the bones and leave them how they are. However, this is a port where we want people to have the easiest time hand animating this model themselves. So we're going to have to cut animations out of the entire process.